Welcome back to the Technician License Course, Chapter 6. I'm Pat Tice, WA0TDA at ARRL.net. This is Lesson Plan Module 14, Communicating with Other Hams, Part 2. Let's take a look at what we're going to cover today. In Lesson Plan Module 14, it's going to be nets, emergency communications, special modes and techniques, and a little bit of advice about how to pass the exam. Let's get started. Let's start with nets. Last time we did mention nets and how there could be different nets for different types of activities. Let's delve into that just a little bit more. Nets is short for network. And this evolved over the years in amateur radio to share and exchange information in an organized and efficient way. There were social nets where you just get together like maybe people around a table just having a lunch or coffee. Traffic nets where you're handling more formalized information that's set up to be delivered from one specific source to another specific source. And then there are emergency and public service nets, which also tend to be traffic nets of some kind, but the traffic is for a special purpose. Let's say like during a disaster, it might be that there's a net that covers traffic for the Salvation Army. And this could be traffic related to the emergency, such as getting provisions from one area to another area where they're needed. So, different types of nets for different purposes. Traffic nets refer to formal messages that are relayed via amateur radio. A radiogram is structured to ensure accuracy. So a radiogram is a form that you can fill out. They can be done on paper or on a computer, but it prompts you to fill in the right blanks with the right information so that you know who this information is coming from, where it's supposed to be going, exactly what the information is, and there's going to be some number or identifier to it to make sure that it can be tracked in some proper way. The National Traffic System, or NTS, that's November, Tango, Sierra, let's practice those phonetics, has specific procedures for doing all of this, and, of course, for the accountability that we do need when we're passing formal traffic. Let's talk a little bit about emergency and public service nets. Public service nets may be used for training or for actual emergency situations. So, let's say training for amateur radio operators as well as emergency groups and managers supported by amateur radio. Now, not everybody in this category is going to be an amateur radio operator. We might be working with people from the Red Cross or the Salvation Army, or perhaps municipal organization, governmental organization, maybe even an energy company like a power plant, a nuclear power plant. Places where there is a potential for a public service emergency needs public service training. And that means the ham operators who are communicators will need to train with some of the staff from some of these other organizations, be it police, National Guard, energy workers, whatever, sheriff's deputies. So the purpose of training is to get people to be able to work together and everybody knows their part and how to do it. There are emergency nets, and this is what you actually do in a real emergency. You put that training to good use. There is a net structure. It starts at the top with the net control station, which we mentioned before, NCS, November Charlie Sierra, traffic cop who controls the flow of information. That's your net control station. If I'm checking into a net, I'm going to call the net control station first before I talk to anybody else I might hear on the net. Or the net control station may be expecting me to be there listening, and the net control station may call me. In any case, all the traffic goes through and is managed by the net control station. So for each net there are check-in and check-out procedures. This depends on the structure of the net. There is a priority or emergency access to net control. So if something happens, it comes up, it's a real emergency, only you know about it. Let's say you're out spotting for Skywarn or something like that. You see a tornado drop from a cloud, a wall cloud, so that needs to be brought to the attention of the net right away. And in that case, you have priority or emergency access to net control, and the net control wants and expects that. So you would give the net control a call and get your traffic in there right away. Communications discipline is vital in this kind of a situation. You have to learn about and learn how to follow procedures for that particular net so that things run efficiently. Speak only when you're directed to, and only to whom you are directed. Follow through with your commitments. If you say you're going to be there, you should be there. And if for some reason you cannot be there, you have to let the net control station know about that. Here's a radiogram. This thing has been around for decades, and it does have all of the basic information that you might need. So up near the top you see the number 207 right under the ARRL diamond logo. That's the number of this radiogram. It has a precedence which is kind of like the importance of this particular one. The other thing that's important, the station of origin, W1FN, there in that top line. The check, what that means is that there are 10 words in the message, not counting the signature. So if you look down a bit, you can see need more cots and sanitation kits at all 5 shelters. So that's the body of the message, and the count is there are 10 words in the message. And the reason we do a count is because we want to make sure that the entire message is delivered correctly. Okay, place of origin, Lebanon, there up in the top line, time filed 1200, date January 4th, and then here comes some important information. 2, Mark Doe Red Cross Disaster Office, and so on. And there's a telephone number there as well. And then after the main body of the message, there's Joan Smith, Shelter Manager. That's the signature. And the signature does not count toward the check of 10 words. So it's only the basic body of the message. And that's a simple radiogram. Just get the basics in there and you'll do okay with this. It's not rocket science, but you do need to practice. And not all of these need to be filled out exactly like this. All the forms that you might have might not be exactly like this. It may be done on computer, and it may be slightly different from net to net. So that's the importance of practice. Now, to support emergency operations is a basic function of amateur radio. It's one of the most important reasons that we actually exist as a service. I would urge you to get involved and use what you have learned. Know where you fit in the overall emergency management team. Now, not everybody can participate in these exercises to the same extent. Some of us may be older or have disabilities, but participate where you can and be available if possible. There are some emergency communications organizations that you should know about. Radio Amateur Civil Emergency Service, RACES, R-A-C-E-S, supports civil emergencies and is national in scope. So this is mostly connected with governmental organizations type of thing. Amateur Radio Emergency Service, that's a trademark, A-R-E-S, a registered trademark of the ARRL, and that is local and regional in scope. It's run by the ARRL, supported by the ARRL, and it supports non-governmental agencies. So who would that be? That would be like Salvation Army, Red Cross, Excel Energy, places like that. Here are some tips for effective emergency communication. First thing, I don't want to become part of the problem, okay? If I'm trained, if I know what I'm doing, if I follow the procedures, I will be a helper. I won't be part of the problem. But if I step out of that role and start trying to communicate with members of the net who are not the net control station directly without going through the net control, or if I think I'm just going to stop and have lunch without telling anyone, or if I just decide that almost accurate is good enough for the information, it doesn't have to be completely accurate, whatever. These are all things that can be a problem. You're a communicator. You're not a decision or policy maker. Remember that. You're there to communicate and do your job. Don't give out any unauthorized information. Sometimes disasters result in injuries or death, or situations where it would be inappropriate to give out information about somebody who is seriously injured or who passed away. So you don't want to do that. You want to go follow your net guidelines, keep that information strictly in confidence, and communicate accordingly. You also have to know about this guy here, your own abilities and limitations. You want to keep yourself safe. Not keeping yourself safe could involve not dressing appropriately. You don't want to wear flip-flops to an emergency situation. You want to have enough proper clothing. You want to have a safety vest if necessary, maybe even a hard hat. It just depends on the situation. So keep yourself safe. Follow radio discipline and net procedures. This is what we have the practice sessions for. And protect personal information. Remember, amateur radio communications is public, so people can listen. And you want to be careful what you say on there. How do we know when an emergency is an emergency? Well, one way is by emergency declarations. The FCC might declare a temporary state of communications emergency, and that could include details of the conditions and rules to be followed in that case. Specifics communicated through websites and ARRL bulletins, the National Traffic Service, and on the air are all ways you find out about an emergency declaration. If there is an emergency declaration, there may be restricted frequencies involved, and those frequencies are just going to be used for the emergency. So you want to avoid operating on restricted frequencies unless you are engaged in relief efforts. So what they are saying here is, even though I may not be involved in this emergency communication system at all, I should know enough, and I'm expected to know enough, that in a communications emergency, restricted frequencies are off limits to my rag chewing or contesting or whatever else I might have planned to do there myself. So just be aware of that. Be in the know. If you have to make or answer a distress call, rule number 1, speak in plain language. Pretty much everybody understands Mayday, 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 or SOS on Morse code. But nothing beats plain language, and you have to be able to identify yourself, give your location accurately. So there's a certain amount of situational awareness that you need there. If you are in an emergency situation, take just a few seconds to figure out, hey, where am I? How do I describe my location? So a street name, a number of a house, that gives the number of the block that you're in. You're on the west side of the street. State the situation, describe the assistance required, and provide other important information, such as if there are injuries, if there's a fire, if other emergency personnel are available or have arrived at the scene. In tactical communications, we sometimes use tactical identifiers. Now this is something where you've got a situation that's going on. This is not right exactly when it starts, but the situation is underway, and you are going to be able to communicate quite a bit during this situation. It may not be an emergency situation. It may be a situation where it's a public service event, like let's say a parade, a marathon, a bike-a-thon, a snowmobile race, something like that. Sometimes it makes sense to use tactical identifiers. So let's say it's a run, and so all of the runners are out there, and you're stationed at let's say at the post office, and the runners are going to be running by the post office at a certain time, we figure. So you can identify yourself on the radio on that public service net as post office. This facilitates communications because when you say this is post office, and then you say, well, we've got a runner down here at post office, then people know exactly what's going on. But you do still have to use your call sign because the FCC rules still apply. So every 10 minutes and when you're changing operators or at the end of a series of transmissions. But otherwise, for that frequent communication during the event, like a marathon, a run, or race, whatever, and you're stationed at a particular spot, armory, post office, things like that, you can just use those tactical identifiers and identify yourself as post office or armory or whatever it happens to be. Again, you'll learn this when you do your practice for public service communications. Emergency equipment is important. If you're going to be involved in public service emergency responses, a Go kit is really a good idea. In fact, a Go kit is a good idea for any household. A Go kit contains portable amateur radio equipment, in the case of amateur radio operators like us, emergency power sources. This could be a crank-generated radio or a solar panel, folding solar panel, certainly batteries to take along for different types of things, including your ham radio gear, personal survival supplies and equipment, and that can include medications that you might need, maybe a candy bar. You don't want people to get low on sugar, certain other things that you need personally should be in that Go kit so that you can just grab and go. That's why it's a Go kit. You keep it packed up like that, you have those things in it, and it's ready to go. In your emergency communications training, if you are going to participate, please get training. Actively participate in training and drill activities. And these can be nets, public service activities where you actually go and do a staged public service event, or attend community meetings and get involved in your community. Take emergency communications courses. There are ARRL courses at arrl.org. And there are FEMA courses on NIMS and other topics. And some of those NIMS and FEMA courses may actually be required for certain types of public service communications. I can't emphasize enough how important it is to know what you're doing when you respond to an emergency and you're participating in one of these as a formal participant. You need to know the command structure. Those are the kinds of things that are going to be covered in your NIMS courses. And those are all available online. You don't have to go anywhere to take them. You can just do them online. Okay, so awards, Dxing, and contesting. Let's shift gears here to the more fun type of stuff. So this is a hobby activity, not public service. And these types of on-the-air activities provide some incentive to get on the radio. You can learn about propagation, HF and VHF, UHF propagation as you search for specific stations on various bands. You can improve your operating skills, and of course, it's all great fun. Some awards are WAC, which is contacting all 6 inhabited continents, WAS, contacting all 50 states in the United States, and VUCC, which is contacting 100 grid squares on VHF or UHF. And all of these things are just personal goals that you can set up for yourself. Now remember, I did talk about logging last time, and these awards make logging essential. You have to log down your contacts, and I suggest you learn how to use Logbook of the World to do that. You can have logging software. I use QRZ.com log, and I log on that regularly, and every once in a while, like every couple of days, I upload the information from my QRZ.com logbook to Logbook of the World, which is an ARRL service, but you don't have to be an ARRL member to use it. Dxing is fun. Dxing means contacting stations far away from where you are, and this has been a tradition since the very first days of radio. On HF, usually it means contacting stations in other countries. On VHF and UHF, it might mean contacting stations outside of your normal coverage area, which is usually line of sight. Some contests are the ARRL Rookie Roundup, North American QSO Party, State QSO Parties, VHF and UHF contests, the CQ Worldwide DX Contest. That is a huge contest, and it has a single sideband and CW or Morse code version. Those are on different weekends. And then contest calendars can provide lots more contests that are going on around the world. So you can check with the National Contest Journal. It's ncjweb.com. You see there after North American QSO Parties, and get some ideas about contesting there, what's going on. So, and also look on the ARRL website, or you can just Google ham radio contest calendars, and I'm sure a number of things will come up for you there. Field Day is a fun activity. This kind of combines emergency communications training with a competitive spirit. So, one foot in each world here. Set up a portable station and antenna in the field or mobile or anywhere and make as many contacts as possible. It's fun, and it gives you a little bit of practice in the field. You can get started with your local radio club or group. It's a great way to get involved with amateur radio, and you're going to be exposed to different kinds of equipment too. Not just the radios that you have, but the radios that other people have brought to the Field Day station. The Stillwater Amateur Radio Association does support Field Day. visit our field day site, and have fun trying out the radios and watching what's going on. If you're a coffee drinker and like sweet rolls and donuts, usually those are available too. So there's some incentive. Special event stations are fun too. Those are set up to commemorate some significant local event. Usually stations are demonstration stations set up for some kind of public display, and commemorative certificates are awarded for contacting the stations. One that we have, let me see if I can get the certificate here off of the wall. There we go. This is the W0JH Isolation Station Special Event. Now we usually call this an ice station because what we do is we set up a station on the lake ice on President's Day weekend, and this station uses portable equipment to operate. The antennas are put up in a tree near on the shore of the lake, but the actual station is out on the lake ice. Now for this particular one during COVID times, we distributed the activities around to the different stations or different people who wanted to participate using their own home stations just because of the COVID pandemic. But we will eventually get back to getting back on the lake ice, and we'll have that special event station. It's a lot of fun to work a special event station because you have other stations calling you left and right, and it really gets to be pretty hectic. It's a lot of fun, and people ask about it every year and thank us for doing that activity, that special event activity. Radio direction finding is also fun and useful. It's useful for locating noise and interference sources, and it works best if you have some kind of a directional antenna that you can turn one way or the other. For VHF, this can be a little handheld antenna, a beam antenna, or for HF work, it can be an antenna mounted on a post with a rotator. So fox hunting competitions usually are VHF and UHF, and that means the small antennas, and they offer a fun opportunity to learn and practice. You learn how to triangulate between two locations and have the antennas pointing, and where the points extended across, that would be where your hidden station is located. The Fox is a hidden transmitter, and one of the club members will be out there with a hidden transmitter, transmitting occasionally and driving the fox hunters crazy with their equipment, trying to triangulate and figure out where the hidden transmitter might be. But this is not just all fun and games, it's good training for search and rescue. And in fact, you've actually seen this kind of activity done. Maybe you didn't even know about it, but when you see wildlife people out checking for migratory birds and things like that, for animals that might live across a range, let's say bears. They're tracking bears. They have radio collars on them, and these can be tracked by radio direction finding, which is how that's usually done. So it's a good activity to learn about, and a fox hunt, or hidden transmitter hunt they're sometimes called. Depends on where you are. Here in Minnesota we call it fox hunting, but out in California I've seen hidden transmitter hunting used much more often. Amateur satellites are another way to communicate. Oscar is orbiting satellites carrying amateur radio, and we have a number of satellites up there right now. It's not just the United States either. There are other countries like Saudi Arabia and Japan, and there are a lot of satellites out there with amateur radio capability. The modes are FM or analog SSB and CW, digital as well. And of course we can contact the amateur radio station on the International Space Station if the astronauts or cosmonauts happen to be available to talk to us on whatever pass they're making at the time. So those are some fun activities. You should know a little bit about satellite terms. An uplink is a Earth station transmitting to a satellite. Now, if you're like most of us, you are the Earth station, unless you're an astronaut. So you would be using the uplink frequency. That's the Earth station transmitting to the satellite or to the International Space Station. The downlink is when the satellite or the International Space Station transmits to stations back here on Earth. A beacon is a signal from a satellite with information about satellite operating conditions. So that may have some data about the temperature of the processor and how the batteries are doing and so forth. And Doppler shift is another thing to be aware of, because the frequency that we use both for the uplink and for the downlink is going to shift due to the relative motion between the satellite. You know, it's going overhead like that, and depending on which way it's going, it's going to be either approaching us or moving away from us, and that is going to affect the frequency that we use to contact that satellite. So you have to be aware of Doppler shift. If a satellite is moving away from us, the frequency is usually lower, and if it's approaching us, then the frequency would be a little higher. Okay, low Earth orbit is a LEO. Remember that. It might be something that's on your exam. LEO, low Earth orbit. A low Earth orbit satellite is something like a Starlink satellite from the SpaceX company. They're doing that internet deal by a satellite, and their solution is to have many satellites, swarms of satellites up there in low Earth orbit, and they're moving fairly fast if they're in low Earth orbit. And so they have some Doppler shift as well. And I'm not sure exactly how they make that work, but I trust the engineers to make it work. Some satellite terms to know. Spin fading.
Bryce Canyon. Oh, I wish I was there with my camera.
Okay, spin fading.
Yep, we're taking lots and lots of pictures, but it's been pretty wet the last couple of days, very sunny today.
Packet radio satellite. I don't know if you can hear that satellite traffic there.
Long time no hear. We're in Bryce Canyon.
I hope you're able to hear that in the recording.
Oh, I wish I was there
Tracking
with my camera.
software gives beam heading and times when the satellite is in view.
Yep, we're taking lots of...
So you can use tracking satellite on your smartphone or your computer to make this thing
I wish I was there with my camera.
work for you. You know where the satellite is and where to point your
Yep,
antenna.
we're taking lots and lots of pictures, but it's been pretty
So
wet the last couple
the
of days,
mode
very sunny today.
is the band's satellite is using for uplink and downlink. So mode UV equals 70 centimeter uplink, 2 meters downlink. U stands for UHF, V stands for VHF. Other special modes are slow scan TV, SSTV, or sending snapshot pictures via slow scan TV. And slow scan TV is used on the HF bands because it takes up very little bandwidth. You can usually find it. If you want to hear what a slow scan TV signal sounds like, you can go to 14.230 megahertz upper sideband and listen on that frequency, and you'll hear a funny sound, and that is the sound of pictures being sent on 20 meters. And these are going to be still pictures when they come out. This shows black and white, but they can be done in color as well. and there is no motion involved in this. The scan is slow. It goes across the screen like one line at a time to build up the picture, and then you've got the picture, and once the picture is there, then people will be talking on single sideband using their microphones about that picture on that same frequency. You can also have ATV or amateur TV. Now this is going to be similar to commercial TV imagery, except it's the older, lower resolution 480, and it's going to ansanalog TV format. This is, as I said, the NTSC system, the National Television Standards Council system, that was in use before digital TV came along. So that old type of TV scanning. But in that kind of TV, you can have actual motion. And you are not going to find this on the HF bands because it takes up far too much bandwidth. This is something for much higher frequencies like the UHF bands. Another special mode is radio control, or RC. This is telecommand, and you can use the 50 megahertz band, the 6 meter band for that if you want. And there are other frequencies available as well. But anyway, what you're doing is you control a model aircraft or a model boat or a model car or something using this radio control. And you do have to have your amateur radio license to do this. And this is one of the places where there's a little bit of difference in how you identify your station. So with radio control, you are going to identify your station by having your call sign on the controller, and for good practice I would put it on the model airplane as well. And you don't actually speak when you're using these controllers, to do things and control your aircraft. So that's why your call sign is just written on the device. All right, so there are some practice questions, and we don't need to go through those today because I'm going to advise you, just like I did last time. I would like you to take as many practice exams as possible using the internet, and just make sure that you do them over and over again. And then I like taking the practice exams because they give you an idea how you're improving as you go along there. If you do take practice exams, they will help you because you are doing two things. You are actually learning what the questions are, and those same questions may show up in your exam, and you're familiarizing yourself with the correct answers. And because you are forced to think about it, you'll see there are 4 choices for each question. You're going to notice that one answer is maybe outrageous, and you can just eliminate that right off the bat. Another answer or 2 are going to be kind of, sort of, and then of course there's the correct answer. So you're learning not only what the correct answer is and reinforcing that knowledge in your head, but you're also learning how to take tests. So let's just take a quick look here and see what we're talking about there. So what is the FCC Part 97 definition of telemetry? A one-way transmission of measurements at a distance from the measuring instrument. Now, this is the reason I don't really like practice exams that are done this way with only the correct answer. You're not seeing the incorrect answer. Now you can do this and go through these just like this and familiarize yourself just by memorization with the correct answer, but it will not teach you how to take the exam. If you go to an actual practice exam site, you're going to be presented each question in a 35 question exam that's computer generated just for you, with 4 answers, A, B, C, D. You're going to pick one of those letters and put it in the computer, and that's going to be logged, and at the end of the test you're going to find out what's right and what's wrong and what your score is. That's a lot more that you're learning right there, because you're learning how to pick the correct answer. You're not going to be distracted by the different format when you actually sit down and take your exam, because the exam, you're going to be marking an answer sheet rather than using a computer, but it's going to be essentially the same thing. That practice test is going to be printed on paper. Each question of the 35 is going to have 4 possible answers, A, B, C, D. You're going to have to look at those and then mark the answer sheet using a number 2 pencil to A, B, C, or D. And I want you to get used to doing it that way, please, rather than just doing it this way. Now there is one advantage to doing this in this particular way, and that is you don't have the distraction of the wrong answers. So in this case, this is a way to familiarize yourself with the language of the correct answers only. It's another way to study, but I don't actually prefer it. I prefer practice exams, and I've heard from many people over the years that practice exams really worked for them, doing lots of them and making sure that they know how to take an exam. Well, that's it for this time. I wish you well. Good luck in your exam. I'm sure if you take your practice exams and you start getting passing grades and you stay at it, you're going to do just fine. One thing I do want to alert you to that's just recent news this week is that the FCC has decided they're going to have a fee of $35 to get registered in their ULS system. That's their Universal Licensing System. So this $35 fee starts in mid-April. I would like you to have your technician course finished and have you take your exam and be successful before that time so that you can save that $35. So keep that in mind, and that's another reason to get out there and take those practice exams and really get familiar with them. Because after, let's see, I think it's April 19th, I don't have it in front of me right now, but April 19th, 2022, the program comes into effect, and they are going to start charging $35 to get your call sign. So do yourself a favor, save yourself some money. You'll have enough to go out for lunch and maybe have even a couple of expensive coffees or something, and dessert too, if you save that $35, and you don't have to send it to the government until after mid-April. If you do test after mid-April, you are going to have to spend that money. My understanding now is that if you can pass more than one exam at your first sitting here before mid-April, so let's say you pass your technician and your general, which you can study for the same way, taking practice exams. If you can do both of those, you can get a freebie on both of them before mid-April. If, however, you have to test after mid-April and the $35 fee is in effect, I think the way I'm interpreting this is that if you pass more than one exam at a given VE session, I believe you can do all 3 amateur technician, general, and extra, provided you pass all the exams. I think that will only cost you $35 to get in the Universal Licensing System. So there's some strategy to think about, and whatever you do, I'm looking forward to talking to you on the air sometime. 73, and good luck with your exam.